Kyle Jolliffe is here today from Toronto, Canada, and he's our speaker once again. I think Kyle probably gets one of the prizes for the top 4 or 5 people who've been able to present more than once or twice. He always does a good job and shows us something from his own collecting interest. And today he's talking about roadside. I started to say roadside America, but it's roadside Canada and United States. But just the wonderful grouping of postcards that were made to advertise and to display and show off what was out there along the roadside. But Kyle's here, and the name of his program today is Tin Can Tourist Camps, Auto Courts and Motels from the 1910s to the 1970s. Thanks for being here, Kyle, and I'll step aside and let you take it away. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hal. I'm very pleased to be here today. So there's tens of thousands of cards in the roadside accommodation category. And I've selected the ones that I found interesting and or attractive, and that illustrates these various themes connected with this area of postcards. The themes are national, they're regional, they're local, and they're cultural, and they all revolve around the automobile. And the automobile is the one piece of technology that most transformed American life in the 20th century. The first card is of the tin canners. Now, the tin canners were early tourists. They used converted delivery vehicles, which they called house cars, and they set off to camp. And here they are in Florida with tents and maybe a kitchen area. And they had a free spirit to them. The caption in the top left-hand corner reads, "Where the Iceman cuts no ice, or the gas, or the coal, or the red man either." But they needed organization because land use like this led to conflict, and there would have been sanitation issues. So they organized in 1919, set up the group called the Tin Can Tourists of the World. Here's the Gainesville Tourist Camp, which was run by them but sponsored by a local filling station, that was the old name for gas station. And the tourist camp promised electric lights and city water and every convenience. So it was free for the use of tourists. People just flocked there. People came year after year, and there was a real sense of camaraderie to these people. In this enlargement from that same postcard, we can see something going on. Maybe it's a July 4th celebration, or maybe it's the opening of the camp, somewhere around that time, 1920 to 1922. Just a real team spirit behind these people. The early tin canners and other campers were greatly assisted by new roads. In Ontario, there was a new highway built called the Ferguson Highway, which led up to part of northern Ontario. And here's a campsite that was quickly established from about 1930, a nice white border card. So things happened quickly at these campsites. Buildings were put up. Here we can see some cabins and what looks like a main building where meals presumably would have been served. There might have been a boathouse. And this type of tourist camp was built all over Canada and the United States. Here's a more commercial version of that tourist camp that we just saw, with rooms available for people. It boasted modern equipment, a camp kitchen, a dining room, baths. So very close to Niagara Falls from about 1933. So in Florida, we find the All States Court and Tourist Camp in St. Petersburg. And we can see from the various insets that it really did live up to what they called America's modern tourist camp. There's a community hall, there's a drugstore, there's a grocery store. The center inset looks like people are playing lawn bowling. Then there's an area for trailers, early versions of modern trailers. They started being constructed in the 1920s. And then we can see the bungalows themselves, a long driveway and some individual bungalows, which were furnished with basic kitchen and kitchen and washroom facilities, and a small kind of carport as well. Here's the back of that same card, touting all their advantages: private baths, garages, lights, water, gas rangers, gas heaters, etc. So the whole emphasis is on cleanliness and comfort. Tourist homes also had a role in various places, especially Niagara Falls, Ontario. Here's one that was established in 1926, and this card by the Kurtijk Company was published in 1939. So there's 3 buildings, so lots of space for visiting travelers, including a garage area. Trailers got better and better as the years came by, and of course cars increased in power so that they could tow big trailers, and many trailer camps were established in Florida. This is a nice Ticknor view of one of them. Here's a combined bungalow and trailer court in Miami, 300 trailer spaces and 50 cottages. And of course, the U.S. had its route system, which was established in 1926, and one of those routes led to Wyoming. Here's a very lovely Kurtijk white border card, really like a landscape painting, one of my favorite cards. Change happened quickly in the 1930s in terms of the accommodations and related facilities being improved. Here's a card from 1934, also by the Kurtijk Company, for the Rodeo Springs Cottage Camp. There's a lunchroom. There's a place for people who want to go dancing. There's a service station, and there's tires prominently displayed. The early cars, particular, like the Model Ts, they needed a lot of maintenance. The tires weren't very good. Maintenance was really important as part of the, overall traveling experience, and many tourist camps and auto courts had service stations with them. Here's the same establishment, but it's from 1937, again, a Kurtijk card, and things have been improved. The gas station setup has changed. Pikes Peak is in the background as well. This is from 1941, again, more changes. And now it's not a rodeo tourist camp, it's the Rodeo Court and Hotel. So they're really working to emphasize quality and cleanliness and being modern. Air conditioned and steam heated. What more could you want? Some places, though, did not worry that much about constantly updating themselves. This place was on US 1, which led to Florida. The Teasley's Tourist Camp had a service station, had a dining room, and a variety of cottages from somebody's trip in November of 1939. This slide is also of Teasley's cottage camp, and the lower frame's interesting because it has a trailer being pulled by a quite powerful car from the 1930s. Casablanca Auto Court in Salt Lake City gives you a picture of the interior of one of these auto courts. Very basic from the time, but certainly projects cleanliness and comfort and convenience. This card is from an establishment also in the National Register of Historic Places, advertises its closeness to local attractions, its private bath. Some of the early places had bathhouses rather than cottages with which included washroom facilities. But change was rapid for such establishments. You can see in the background that there are spaces for a garage area. But the next slide, we see what we would describe, as a modern motel. The parking for cars is outside. It's one single block of units. And of course, many people, many owners and operators really did work hard to convey an image of cleanliness and comfort, and they wanted to project that in advance, of course, through postcards. So this one not only talks about the quality of the establishment, the beauty rest mattresses with Ace Coral Springs, a private bath, hot and cold water, Also, says people can look at the cottages beforehand without any obligation. Beauty rest mattresses, that's part of the same mass production as is involved with automobiles such as the Model T or the Model A. Local architecture is also reflected in cards. This particular pre-World War II motel has us facing stone that was locally quarried, and the prominent geographic feature is featured in the background, the Sleeping Dutchman, on Highway 66 as well. This establishment is also listed in the National Register of Historic Places, similar auto court style with the gas station in the center and wings of units to the left and the right and behind. This is Spanish colonial revival architecture. The wigwam villages were 7 unique motels. The teepees, actually, rather than wigwams, were constructed, and inside the teepees were beds and washrooms and whatnot. There's still a few of these left. The other ones didn't survive. Sanders Court and Cafe is significant because that's where the Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe was developed by, of course, Colonel Harlan Sanders. Who among us could forget him? And I actually met him one morning at the Toronto airport many years ago. Blue Swallow Court, another one of many motels on Highway 66, was famous for its friendliness and also for its neon sign, which isn't shown here on this sepia tone card, but it's shown in the next modern card, which reflects the iconic status of this establishment, which is still in operation. Lovely modern card. Has appeared as the background in some movies, including Back to the Future 2. This card I saw on eBay. I just really liked the design. Unfortunately, it had already been sold, but it's just a great linen card that I would include in that category called Linen Stunners. It's Pueblo Revival architecture and emphasizes both the accommodation and the service station facilities. Just really showcases the linear features that they show off so well in linen features, the sign advertising central heat, the vertical Pueblo Court sign, as well as the signs for the AAA recognition and the standard dealer sign related to Standard Oil. And the Fred Harvey hotels also included the Grand Canyon Auto Camp. Here's an excellent type card from 1940 from a series related to this particular auto cabin camp. Really a home away from home atmosphere that's conveyed in this image. This is famous Art Deco motel, no longer there, but one of the units was saved and it's in a museum in the area. Really nice design, but eventually its time came and went and it was demolished. And it similarly advertises the quality features of it, the private tile bath, the hot and cold water, porter and maid service, the beauty rest spring and mattresses, the hot water, the radiant heat, so on. And it's also got a central location near highways 61, 66, 67, and 77. All those U.S. routes really transform travel. Coronado Lodge is still in operation. It's in the National Register of Historic Places, mostly, I think, for a particular reason, that it's in the Negro Motorist Green Book. And the Negro Motorist Green Book was published by a Brooklyn man between 1936 and 1966. It provided African-American travelers with assurances of places where they wouldn't be turned away, motel or auto court or a restaurant or a service station. And that was valuable to not just African-American tourists, but, businessmen and performers and athletes who would be traveling. I mean, there's a famous story about how the Dodgers were turned away from a St. Louis hotel because they had Black athletes. So this is the America, before the Civil Rights Act, which in some places was segregated. And that's why I say, culture is one of the themes of roadside accommodation postcards, because it shows us the tension points in that society. This is a new hotel. There's a real boom in motel construction between the 1940s and 1960s. A lovely Kurt Tyke card, especially with the cowboy and the rear and the horse bucking up in the bottom center of the card. A lovely deckled edge card for the Coronado Hotel Courts, which had locations in Joplin, Missouri, San Antonio, Texas, and Corpus Christi. If you paid an extra 50 cents, you could have the deckled edges. This is recommended by Duncan Hines, the AAA endorsement. Really nice card. This card I included, it's also in the National Register of Historic Places, but it shows how the terminology evolved. We started with tourist camps and it changed to tourist courts and auto camps, and eventually it generally settled on the name motel, but here it's still hyphenated. And here's our Wichita content, courtesy of Hal Ottaway. So night cards are quite rare, but perhaps this was specially done for the opening of the hotel, as the caption at the bottom says, Plaza Court Motel, City's Newest, South Broadway, Wichita, Kansas. I think the car on the left is a Cadillac. That's a theme of the cards after the Second World War, to feature prominently fancy cars. A very nice and very scarce card. This is the Plaza Court Motel as it looked during the day. It was torn down some years ago. They weren't able to save the big tree in front of it. They mentioned that, give particular mention to the history of the tree, and also the fact that the road that the motel was located on was an area which cattle were driven through, to a railhead from about 1867 to 1872. So you get local history as well on this card. Motel Westwood, one of many motels constructed in that 1940 to 1960 period. The top two insets, I believe, were photographed by a local photographer for this card. You should pay particular attention to the inset on the left. We'll come back to that same area. So it's good construction. There's no carports anymore. Steam heat. So it projects an atmosphere of cleanliness and comfort. There's no TV in the room, though. That was fairly new. Later, we see motels advertising that they provide TVs. So this is 2021, before the Motel Westwood was renovated to, quote, micro apartments, and the name was changed to the Living Inn. So this is that same area as in the first card for this motel, that top left-hand insert, but it's very basic accommodation now for, I guess, about $600 a month, US. And it's got a TV on the wall and an air conditioner. And so it's not fancy, but it's basic accommodation, and it has survived the test of time. It must have been constructed well. Many of these hotels were demolished, not in a good condition to maintain, or even if they're not demolished, it's not easy to maintain them, even fencing them off, because people steal the copper wires and it's expensive to replace, and so on. This is out in Vancouver, British Columbia, and I've chosen this card for a couple of reasons. It's a real photo card. There's so many cards because there were salesmen going out, advertising what the products of various postcard companies, whether it's Ticknor Brothers or the Kurt Tyke Company or Color Picture or some other smaller local publishers such as Beals in Iowa and MWM. So the cottages here are really bungalows in kind of an English style, because many people emigrated from England to British Columbia, the province where this bungalow court is located. Later on, this large triangular piece of land became a Ramada Inn, and then within the last few years, that was bought by the city of Vancouver and converted into housing for people with disabilities. So the motel traffic didn't just go south or west; it also went north up into the Maine and the maritime provinces of Canada. This is a lovely real photo postcard by a Montreal photographer named George Carles, who did many similar cards of Gaspé and other similar areas of Quebec. So it has a main house where there would have been rooms inside, and also some cottages overlooking the St. Lawrence, plus a hotel and restaurant on the closer to the highway that goes by the hotel. Auberge is French for hotel. Another similar real photo card of a smaller inn. Again, it must have been really invigorating, to wake up in the morning and smell the refreshing river air and perhaps take a quick dip and then, have a lovely breakfast or lunch provided by the owners of the hotel. The Gulf Hotel and Cabins in Rivière Madeleine, another card by the same Montreal photographer. And you can also see that there's a good highway for people who want to travel there. And there are also service stations in these towns as well to help to if they had any car maintenance issues. So I've included this slide because the travel up to Maine and through the maritime provinces, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Quebec, and also I think to some degree Ontario, it's culinary tourism. Lots of fresh seafood. The signboard next to the diner in the center, advertises salmon and lobster. So there really was a demand for such accommodation. And I think when I was about 8 years old, I went off with my parents to the maritime provinces and probably stayed somewhere like this, but I can't remember. The 1950s is a time of post-war prosperity. More people are owning cars, so there's more people on the road. An accountant sees the potential for franchising on a big scale. I mean, there was franchising before, but it might at most be perhaps 8 or 10 motels together. But so this is the first Holiday Inn, but it's called Holiday Inn Hotel Courts, now demolished, built in 1952 in Memphis, Tennessee. Of course, coming back to the theme, civil rights tensions, many of us will recall the bombings that went on in Montgomery, Alabama, tragically. This hotel, which was built by a prominent local Black businessman, hosted civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King, and that was bombed. Nobody was hurt there, though, fortunately. That surge in car ownership due to prosperity also resulted in motels being built in Miami Beach and also places like Las Vegas as well. This is called itself the Sahara Motor Resort Motel. And this and a number of others on Collins Avenue had kind of a kitschy feel to it. This one had camels and a fake Bedouin tribesman standing at the entrance, together with the obligatory fancy car at the front entrance. And some of these are gone. They've been replaced by condos. Another one of those kitschy Miami Beach motels, the Suez Resort Motel, and you can see next to the blue convertible in the top frame some sculptures of the Sphinx. And in the bottom frame, pictures of the hotel swimming pools and palm trees, of course. Another one of those kitschy Collins Avenue motels in Miami Beach. This time, the Desert Inn has a wagon train complete with horses and a red convertible, and of course the swimming pool scene. This is a hotel, but it's much bigger than the earlier Miami Beach hotels that you find on so many linen postcards, and it's really because of the automobile traffic that's coming to Miami Beach, and also airplane travel is popular now and reflected in the hotel's construction. This is a modern hotel, was award-winning for its architecture. The Warm Mineral Springs Inn in Venice, Florida, and as with some of the other motels in this presentation. You can go to the website for the National Register of Historic Places and read in detail the applications to be listed there, which provide a lot of information about the architecture and the history of the hotel, and what merited such motels receiving that designation. It doesn't prevent demolition, but it does give them a certain cachet. This is a motel in Arizona, different than the Florida motels, but it does reflect that desert atmosphere. And you can also see the sign, which promised the various amenities, which now include, pool, TV, phones, hotel rooms, apartments. Similar motels in Las Vegas and Reno and other places, including California as well. A number of places listed in the National Register of Historic Places are of beachfront hotels on the East Coast, such as this one, the Shadow Blue Motel in Wildwood, New Jersey. People call this the Google or doo-wop architectural style because of the bright colors and the geometric patterns. Again, like Miami Beach, some of these motels have disappeared and been replaced by condos. A similar Virginia Beach hotel built in 1965, also in the National Register of Historic Places. And this is the saddest picture. This is where Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. And this hotel is also in the Negro Motorist Green Book. And I've been there, and some of you may also have been there because it's now the National Civil Rights Museum. In 1956, the federal government passed legislation authorizing the interstate highway system. So 41,000 miles of highways, that really, once again, transformed the way Americans traveled. So we see, big hotels by interstates starting in the 1960s and 1970s with illuminated signs at night. And they really dealt a death blow to many smaller hotels on what were now less traveled highways. Like the interstate and other highways, would bypass the existing highways. Another highway on the interstate, the Quality Inn east of franchisee at Lexington, Kentucky, about 1970, and just an enormous sign. In conclusion, the story of tourist camps and auto courts and motels, it's really a series of business cases, how to make the best use of a particular piece of land, that people realized, there were travelers who needed accommodation, and, they saw, by establishing motels or tourist camps or auto courts, on strategic locations, the business would come to them. It would be good for their own motel. It would be good for, local businesses, such as restaurants and gas stations. Motels can really tell us a lot about different aspects of American and Canadian life in the 20th century. And they're also, for many of us, imprinted in our minds that it's what we would see on the outskirts of a city we lived in, or a town that we lived in, sort of like as a landmark. They've disappeared, or they've been replaced by chains. Something's missing for many of us, I think. A sense of nostalgia. The big chain motels aren't quite the same in most cases. So some, do retain that personal touch, like, the Blue Swallow Court in Chucamara. People, do celebrate what was lost. Particularly, there's a lot of interest in the history of Route 66, which was so key in east-west travel. Route 66 started in Chicago and ended up in Santa Monica. And if you get nostalgic, you can also go to YouTube and watch episodes of the old TV show Route 66. That's it for my talk. Thanks for coming, and I'm interested to hear some of your experiences of 20th century motels. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kyle. My goodness. It just brought back lots of memories to me, and the traveling that I did with my family and so forth. Great fun. And I'm sure, let's go to Bill Burton and get him to unmute himself and to please review some of the questions and comments that we've received.
A lot of folks have chimed in about as we've gone through Kyle's talk. Let me just take a couple of them. When did old swimming pools become prominent in the tourist courts? Kyle, do you have any sense of that?
I think that's really a development around 1960. I don't seem to see them in the early ones. I'm not sure why that is, or is it some reason that earlier on it was too expensive or not practical? I don't have a clearer sense than that, but it sort of seems to become required after about 1960. That's definite.
Dolores Rowe points out that the Green Book cards, if you haven't seen the movie of the Green Book, you should really take a chance. She highly recommends it. He says that the star won an Academy Award for it, and the co-star should have it, in her opinion. Is that?
I didn't know that there was a movie. Thank you, Dolores.
Are you? Do you think that the Green Book, as such, was a real boost, or was it something that just was there but didn't really have that much impact?
Well, I think it's a real boost for Black travelers. And I mean, you're looking at numbers. If the Black population is 10% of the American population, I don't know the exact number, but it's just something that goes to the core of that relationship between the innkeeper and the guest. And that's the real power in knowing about the Green Book. In my mind, it's about hospitality, and it also gives us a reason to focus on particular motels, like the Coronado Court Lodge. It's a good example of that the Pueblo Revival architecture, which is notable, for its massing and the parapets and the vigas, these tree logs that supported the roofs. And it's just an interesting story in itself that somebody who worked at the post office and became a travel agent, responded to a need for his community that his community had. You can find the Green Book online and read through it if you wish, and it's just it just goes to the core of American life and the culture of motels.
It also offered safety, I think, and security, because you could pick a place, that would give you some security, because there were some areas that just weren't safe for African Americans to travel through, let alone being told, no, there's no vacancy.
Or be able to use a bathroom in a filling station. My gosh,
Yeah.
Of course.
Or
I think
eat.
it's a big help.
Or eat at the restaurant attached to the hotel that was safe. Yeah.
Sure.
Dolores, do you know if the Green Book movie is streaming somewhere on one of the websites?
I don't know, but it was a few years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that it came out. I imagine if you typed it in on a streaming site, it might come up. But it's totally amazing. It's based on a true story of a famous piano player who was Black and traveled to the South. And
Green Book movie is from 2018.
is that when it was out? Say that again.
2018.
2018.
2018.
Yeah.
It's well worth you watching it. It's sad, but it's uplifting at the same time.
What we're also forgetting about the Green Book is that it was during the Great Migration, where thousands of Blacks were moving from the South up to Chicago and Detroit.
Right.
And so it probably helped them tremendously.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the Green Book really came about after that migration.
Could be, but maybe because of it is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, sure.
Well, the Green Book is from 1936 to 1966. Yeah, so it just helps flesh out the whole stories of motels, because it gives that hospitality aspect in a real immediate sense.
The Green Book movie is available on streaming FX Now, if you get that,
Okay.
I think with ads. It's also available rent or buy on Prime Video,
Great,
if you get
thanks.
that.
Thank you.
Good
I've
research
seen it.
there, George.
I'm sorry. I've seen it 3 times.
Good.
Jack Davis points out that the technology for the construction and maintenance of swimming pools was probably not developed until after World War II. But they were becoming commonplace by the end of the 1950s.
Okay.
What was the value? Was the value of the swimming pool just that the family could have a reason to stop more than just to sleep?
Probably.
Sure.
Yeah,
So
and
you
they
could stay
wanted,
more than one day.
Sure.
Families would stay in a place for 2-3 days. I think the motels originally were just envisioned with people just coming there and staying overnight and leaving in the morning. So no swimming pool needed originally.
right, and I think, people didn't have them at home. So it was a novelty and a luxury to be able to go to a hotel or motel and get in a pool, I would think. I want to interject something, talk about racial tensions and civil rights and all that. I have a very good friend whose family was in the pool building business here in Arkansas for decades. And she says that the whole popularity and attraction of having swimming pools built at home was when segregation ended and integration of public swimming pools happened, and white flight out of some of the areas of town of go to this, bedroom neighborhoods, and people would want their own swimming pools at home. And so it's like when the pools became desegregated, the public pools became desegregated, people then wanted them at their home so they could monitor who came and went at their pool. So that's when the pools at home really came about, and the technology to build those kind of pools, like a smaller pool that would be probably at a motel or at a home versus the big, Olympic sized public pools that would have been available.
So you're saying that when the desegregation of pools happened, mainly white people did not want to segregate to commingle, therefore they built their own pool.
Yes.
Sad.
It is sad.
Yeah, we had a local park that had a swimming pool, and it was not segregated for a long time. And when it finally was desegregated, the blacks were only allowed to swim in it certain days.
That's the way it was in Wichita.
Yes,
too.
yes, it's sad.
Sure.
Well, south of Rochester, we have US 20, which is a transcontinental 2-lane highway from Boston to Newport, Oregon. And there were a lot of these camps, the tourist cabins along there. And a number of them are still there. And they now house migrant workers, because a lot of the agriculture south of Rochester involves hand picking, vegetables,
Sure.
things like that. And so some of the larger farms have gathered together and purchased these. And so it's housing for the workers when they come here during the harvest.
I have a question for Kyle.
Yes.
Are you aware of Eric Seach, a photographer out of Salt Lake City?
No. Was that? But you said something about pink Cadillacs.
Pink Lincoln. Seach, actually, it's sort of like a sidebar here. I mean, one could, begin to collect motels photographs, probably focusing on given photographers who, and Eric Seach was one. I think I have it here. Yeah. And he got a pink Lincoln every year, and he drove around to motels, and he would sell his cards to the motel owner by saying, "Would you like me to park my pink Lincoln out in front?" And
That's
and
great.
I actually have an 8x10 of one of that same
Wow.
card. So and also night photographs triggered my memory of another Seach photograph, and also the bluebird, the blue swallow. And I had this 8x10 and a card of his bluebird restaurant, which very similar graphics. I thought it was interesting. But Seach would be, the Pink Lincoln series would be a little subcategory for the devoted postcard collector.
Fabulous,
Yeah,
fabulous.
there's so many interesting little roads you can follow in terms of motel collecting, and that's why a lot of people um, do collect them, because they can be national, regional, and local, even all in one card. So like that Holiday Inn card that I showed you, that was a local Holiday Inn, but it's national, but it's also cultural, because it's the dawn of the age of mass franchising of hotels.
Yeah, it's such a rich topic. It could go so many directions. I mean, it's really wonderful.
And
Kyle, how long has it
interesting to
taken you
see-
to, oh, excuse me, go ahead.
No, it's interesting to see when you start looking at postcards of motels from the 50s and early 70s. Every motel owner had that sort of add a little flourish. Sometimes you have to look at it in the photograph. Like for a while, it was very popular to put a lot of rocks out and paint them white, or to put a picket fence out and have it sort of go from nowhere to nowhere, and maybe paint it a bright color. And so, everyone had to do something. I mean, or do it through the design of their fence, their motel sign, but something to make them different.
Kyle,
Rick,
how long has it
probably-
taken you to assemble this collection of yours?
Well, I mean, I've been collecting for a couple years, but maybe half the cards I've taken from the internet. Okay, and those to fill in stuff. But what's important, what I found important here is the National Register of Historic Places, because that allowed me to quickly zoom in on certain themes that were emphasized in the applications. So I would recommend that postcard collectors look at that, how what's listed there might impact their collections, and any presentations they might want to give. There's a lot of really rich, carefully collected and set out material. So I mean, so it helps illustrate particular themes. It's a desert for some areas, but for other areas like Virginia Beach, there's a lot of cards, or the motels on Route 66. So to people who make these applications, have a heightened sense of awareness of the history of the places that they want to get a designation for.
Okay, Clarissa Ferreras points out that the TV show Route 66 was not filmed on Route 66.
Okay, I stand corrected, but it's
That's shocking.
still worth looking at. It's still funky stuff.
Yeah.
And it has a
is, but
beautiful
it's-
music track
But it
to it
doesn't show
also.
any part of Route 66, fortunately. It's mainly in Florida and other places where not Route 66. I don't know why.
The
they-
next movie I make, I'm going to hire you as my historical documentation checker, my fact checker.
No, you know more.
Kyle, I have to leave, but I wanted to tell you that I just think it was a fascinating history of how these places evolved.
Yes.
And you did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And the Canadian stuff is important too, because it's all part of like a continental network of highways, and that stretches all the way up and down each coast, and all the way across the prairies in the Midwest for each country.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
And those cards from the Gaspé were gorgeous.
Yeah, I discovered those, and I have maybe 150 of those now. I spent a lot of money. I'm going to give a separate presentation on those next year for the Toronto Postcard Club.
Oh, let us
Right.
know when. That is
Yeah, and then
Oh,
in next
understand.
June, I'll give a presentation on California motels for the San Jose Club. So
All right, we've got some hotel presentations and motel presentations to look forward to.
But the one on Gaspé was that would be great.
yeah, they're a local guy who, like a Quebec guy who was a really good photographer, and he must have driven around for a year or two, and and then sold his stuff, and he just took really great pictures of this rustic area, and they're just they're just wonderful stuff at a time when, you know, everywhere else, almost everywhere else, people had stopped taking real photo postcards. You know, it's because I have to emphasize that there's salesmen out there. We'd never meet these people, but they were out there, you know, visiting hotels, just like the guy with the pink Cadillac guy, you know, visiting motels and taking orders, and
There were entrepreneurs.
that's right.
Don't-
There were lots of entrepreneurs out there, and people willing, you know, motel owners willing to spend some money, not a great deal of money, you know, for an order of maybe 1,000 or maybe 10,000 cards. Or
Robert Bell has a comment that at least me scratching my head. He said, found it, Driving While Black by Gretchen Soren.
Soren,
Okay. What's
she,
that all about? What did you mean by that? Do we know?
Can Roseanne talk for me? I can't really talk.
oh, okay, Gretchen Soren was in the class ahead of mine at the Cooperstown graduate program. She later became the director of the program and did it for decades. So she was, I don't know anything about that book, but I know she's Black, and so she, what are you holding up? Oh, Driving
It's
While
the
Black.
book.
Yeah.
It's the book. It's very good. I read it. It's a history of the Green Book, basically,
Yeah.
and the history of traveling for Blacks in the
And
era.
she's
Is it a book?
she's Black, and she is a wonderful, wonderful person. That's why she was the director of the program for longer than anyone else. But I want to share another book. And Kyle, if do you know about In Search of the Golden West, The Tourist in Western America by Earl Pomeroy?
no, I've never seen this book. You know,
Okay.
this is kind of I kind of hold out a divining rod, you know, for my next presentation topic, and in this case it landed on tourist camps, auto courts, and motels. So thank you for showing that to me.
Yeah, and
Roseanne,
I
what is it
discovered it
again?
while writing my thesis for Cooperstown. And he was a professor at Stanford, later changed to UC San Diego. And I applied there and found out he was retiring. So anyway, but I wanted to share this because
What
it
is the
does
book
go with,
that you shared?
the book is, where are you, Clarissa?
Well,
It's called In Search of the Golden West, The Tourist in Western America. And it goes from like how the trains first brought people west, and then later the whole thing of individual tourism for the middle class changed things even more. So
Yeah, so I've given you a postcard version of that book, essentially.
well, yes and no. Oh, and by the way, it's by the University of Nebraska Press in what year? 1957.
Okay,
So
what's the name of the author again?
Earl Pomeroy.
Okay.
There's a second edition that was published in 2010. So that's the one that's available on Amazon.com.
Well, this one I only bought used a couple years ago on eBay. So
It's an antique then.
yeah, it is. Okay, I have a general question for everyone. As I look at things, I keep seeing vintage postcards, but they're really antiques because they go back to before 1930. And what do the rest of you think about this?
My thought has
I love
always
them
been
all.
that you put in vintage because they're old, but antique means that they're more expensive.
Well, these are really expensive, so, but in my
But
mind,
if you put antique on it, people might be scared away by the idea that they're pricey, even if they are.
Okay.
Vintage will get you to at least look at them.
because for everything else, vintage means it's a copy of something that's antique.
No, not at all.
I don't think so. Yeah.
They
I'm with
did.
Al.
Furniture and clothing. Okay, I'll be quiet.
Kyle, on the term tin can tourist, was that something that a group of people put together, or did it just spring up?
Well, it kind of sprang up because those original people who got in their converted delivery vehicles and went down to Florida, starting about maybe 1910, they cooked from tin cans, and they also, would solder a tin can onto the radiator, as a kind of a badge, and some people say it's related to the Model T nickname of Tin Lizzie, but I think it's more related to the cans. And one place that I read that people would cook these tin cans on the car radiators, but I'm not sure if that's actually true. So I think it's really related to the tin cans that people brought with them and ate from. And
Or the name
but
of the
over time, local cities and towns realized the economic value of the tin can tourists and their successors, and promoted places like the All States Tourist Camp.
In the early 70s, there were camps called Nixonvilles, and there were, I think, about 10 or 15 around the American West, and they were usually people in mobile homes who they'd let each other know where these places were, and they would camp on federal land till they were thrown off. But I think apparently the president at the time apparently had discontinued some sort of passes that senior citizens could get into national parks for free. So this was a rebellion against it. And they'd have a little store in a mobile home, and they'd stay there until the local community evicted them, and then they'd form another one, and you could find out where these places were.
Ashley Ahrens says that she's recently bought a bunch of friends' linen postcards and Chrome's real photos, which are largely of motels and hotels on Route 1 in Virginia. Ashley, do you want to elaborate on that?
No, I think I was just bragging. No, I was just pointing out that this presentation was helpful, Kyle, to help me learn the progression, the evolution of how the early, tin can and all those motor courts and tourist courts have evolved into where we are today. So that'll help me as I'm looking at that collection. So thanks.
Yeah, so change really does happen quickly, once the tin canners show up, that we get established tourist camps, and just the numbers and the economics lead to places like the All States Tourist Camp all over. We could be here for years looking at all the individual cards of these places. There's tens of thousands of them, but what I've done here today, is give you some of the highlights and the dynamics, and it's a combination of things. It's mass production of automobiles, it's good roads, it's economic prosperity, and just the desire to hit the road and get out of the city and see something new. Yeah, I would just emphasize again the valuable information that's in the National Register of Historic Places website. It's really, and that's what led me, for example, to the Negro Motorist Green Book that I, as a Canadian, would never have any clue whatsoever about.
Yeah, I would like to, I guess, pose a question, an observation, perhaps, that at that time, Americans had not seen a lot of America. They knew that it was a big country, but they knew mostly their local vicinity. Maybe you can correct me on that if I'm wrong. And that the opportunity of getting out and actually seeing what the country was sort of helped Americans to establish an identity as American. This is all part of my world. I don't know if that strikes an interesting point of departure for anybody, but I'd be interesting to talk about that topic or hear about it.
Well, there's a slogan that the railroad companies, I think it was them, saying "See America first," and I thought that was a sort of a slot at the let's go to Europe and see the world, but "See America first" struck me as being a good slogan and had to have tied into somehow into the Fred Harvey hotels along the railroad lines. Does that make any sense?
Well,
Sure.
I'm thinking of earlier. I mean, that would be more, am I right, at 50s, 60s, see America first?
Oh, no, I thought it was back in the 20s is when I.
Oh, really?
But
Oh.
I mean, again, I'm not sure. I can't reach my cards right at this point.
Maybe somebody could fill us in.
But when were the Fred Harvey cards done?
I don't know. I mean, really, I think
The
like
ones, the Detroit
40.
Fred Harveys were started around the early 1900s. And then after Detroit closed, went out of business, then they were taken over by other publishers. But I do know that in 1899, 1900, that's when it became a thing for the Fred Harveys with Detroit.
Oh, that early. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Did Fred Harvey have a contract with Detroit?
With
Yes,
the
they did.
Santa Fe Railroad.
Yes, and Fred Harvey died in 1901. So it has to be on the early of the,
Yeah.
not later.
Because Fred Harvey loved quality, and that's what he knew the Detroits could offer.
Hal, back to you.
Okay. We have a good group here that they're sticking with us. So anybody else have any other comments? Thank you for yours, David. Everybody, George, Roseanne, everybody. It's been most interesting. And I'll just say one thing that I collect personally with motel cards is that in the early days, back when I was a little boy and my folks were going, they wouldn't have TVs in every room. They would have one in the lobby with a lot of chairs and things around. So once we had our bath and we had gotten into our pajamas, my sister and I would run to the lobby and sit there and you usually watch. Well, of course it was black and white, but usually pretty snowy and there wasn't much to it, but that was the early part of television. And then you can find motel postcards with an aerial on every single room. That was a short time. So it's just great. It's just wonderful to think about things that you live through and remember. And that's part of the joy of being 80, I guess, or 81. Thank you.
I remember that.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
So Hal, do you collect the ones that have the TV in the lobby then, or just any
Oh,
TV?
yes.
Okay.
Yes, I love motel cards. Early on at a Wichita Postcard Club show, I think it must have been at least 40, 42 years ago, something like that. I can remember going underneath dealers' tables and getting their shoe boxes of motels. They were all a quarter, and I would just go through those and pick out, what I like. They haven't been a quarter for a long time.
I just want to hold up a Fred Harvey card, Detroit card.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's a Fred Harvey Detroit card.
That's there in Albuquerque?
Yeah, that's Albuquerque card.
Alvarado, the hotel that was down.
Last year when we went to Wichita, we went to Winslow, Arizona. And
Yeah.
we stayed on one of the Harvey hotel that had been renovated, of course.
Sure.
And the railway is still stopping as a stop on the back of that hotel.
Right. And a wonderful dining room. Just wonderful.
Yes.
Oh, good food. Really
Worth
great.
going. Instead of staying on the Route 66 hotels, go inside Winslow and go to that one. It's slightly more
Right.
expensive, but it's worth it.
And then also in Las Vegas, New Mexico, they've renovated that old hotel and dining room again. Terrific. Thank you, Kyle, for this
Oh, you're most
fascinating and very
most welcome. My pleasure as always.